Welcome and good morning to some, good afternoon to others, and good evening to those in the UK. We have 126 attendees expected tonight from various locations across the world, including some non-members. So thank you very much to all of you for joining us. This is our third An Evening With session. These were started following a suggestion from members who wanted us to host virtual modelling topics each month. And we have a series of subjects planned on the 26th of each month throughout the year, except in December. Tonight we are joining Robin Taylor, who is a member of our technical team. But before we start, I just need to do a few reminders about the setup for this evening. In terms of housekeeping, I hope you managed to read the specific Zoom instructions which were sent out in advance. Firstly, I have to remind you that this session is being recorded. So if you do not want your image to appear on screen, you can turn off your video and you can change your name if you wish to remain anonymous. You are all muted at the moment, and if you have unmuted, can I ask you to mute again, please? Just stops any background noise. With the number of participants, we have potentially over 100 participants tonight. That is quite important. To ask questions, you can move your cursor to the bottom of the screen and a toolbar appears. If you click on the chat button, a panel will open and you'll be able to type messages to everyone, a bit like sending a text message. Once typed, press return and your question will then appear in the panel and everyone can see it. And this means the same question won't get asked multiple times. Finally, we have two views on Zoom. Normally we're in gallery view, but you can also change it to a speaker view as well. And what I will do, I will highlight Robin when he's talking. If you've forgotten how to change views, there's in the corner of your screen is a little box of dots on the top right hand on my screen. Hover over that and it should come up with two settings, speaker and gallery view. That's where you select speaker view. Jackie Neeshaw is co-host tonight, so whilst I'm asking questions, Jackie will be watching for the next group of questions coming in and we'll take it in turns to get through as many as we can. Our aim is to finish at about 9:30 p.m. and towards the end, if we can allow people to do it, we'll have a live chat. Right. I hope you've all had the link and hopefully time to watch Robin's video about coach building. Tonight, Robin will be able to answer questions about the process you saw on the video, but also show us other aspects of coach building, including methods and techniques for coach construction, from light railway four-wheelers in styrene sheet for the beginner, through to bogie stock, either kit built, scratch built, or any combination of both. So, welcome, Robin.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Do you want to give us a nod? Yeah, you can all hear me. Right, okay then. We've got a list of questions. Most of them, to be honest, come up through the evening anyway. So I'll just continue with the plan I had, which covers, I think all the questions, as I said. If there's any at the end or any that I've missed as I jump on to the next stage, just give us a quick reminder on the chat. And I'm sure James or Jackie will bring that up with me. And there's nothing wrong with when we've gone on to a stage to go back if we need to, because this is your evening, not mine. And we're here to sort of teach as much as we can. I'm going to start off with the simple stuff, I think, the four-wheelers. I then go on to what I think is the most common, the bogie coaches, and most of the questions are on bogie coaches. And then go back to the ones that people seem to have problems with, the six-wheelers. I don't have a problem. Well, over the years, we've done everything wrong, found out what goes wrong and corrected it and kept things running. I mean, spent most of my life with exhibition layouts touring throughout the UK and overseas. So obviously things had to run or people wouldn't invite you anywhere, would they? Well, I wouldn't anyway. I've been a manager in Keighley for 15 years. In the past. So we'll start off with a four-wheel coach. Most people, let's say you're a starter in O gauge, nowadays you'd probably go out and buy a little 06 ready to run, perhaps a special deal on 2 or 3 Dapol wagons. and a circular track when you get home. And I get quite a few emails from people who've done that, and then they want to move on to light railways or a specific railway or something to remember, and they want to make a kit or scratch build. So again, without spending a lot of money, we can hold up a 4-wheel coach. Now with that, it's just plastic card, nice and easy, no problems. I was just looking around the back for another bit, and yeah, it's there. Get a drawing or a picture. When you get a drawing, there can of course be mistakes. This is not an O-gauge drawing. It looks as if it is, but it's from the North Eastern Railway diagram book, and most of the drawings in there were about quarter scale. So I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but whatever company you're with, if you're a member of that society, Great Eastern, LNER, whatever it is, you can usually get copies of diagram books, and a lot of them, locos or coaches, wagons, will have a few basic dimensions on. And from that, I find you can scale everything else that you may need. But basically, that's a piece of 20 thou plastic card. I've drawn out in pencil where I want to put beading. Nice LNER style square beading, I call it. So that's quite easy to do. I'll just read the message there, which I'll come to in a minute. So make mistakes with a pencil, because you can soon rub them out. And you can rub them out with a rubber, or actually I use a fiberglass brush. So I've put the longitudinals on first, just to fill it up a little bit. I've cut the windows out. I use a surgical scalpel. Many modelers use these. They're a very, very good way of chopping your fingers off. But do buy plenty of blades. They do blunt fairly quickly. And if they're blunt and you're pressing on too hard, you have more chance of slipping and damaging yourself. But they're great for cutting plastic card. I'll just score around, say, a window. If it's something like the Highfield kits that have gone now, but you do see them on a second hand a lot, and you're cutting the windows out on something like that, you'll notice that they have rounded edges. So I tend to just score down the straight, so it's the two sides, bottom and top, but don't try and cut round the corners. All you do is make a mess of it. Now, if you want to be clever, you can drill them out first, then cut the straight lines. But I don't bother. I just cut the 4 straight lines and press them out with a flat screwdriver then, and the 4 corners will break. And then you can just trim them with your scalpel again, if you need to, of course. But this one is an earlier coach. It's ex-Stockton and Darlington, actually. It was a passenger brake with the birdcage on the end. So I've got the rest of it down here. That's the start of the side, flat side. And then I've moved on to that. The louvers are actually some white metal castings of loads of them, hundreds, I'd say, if anybody wants any. The axle guards, you've all sorts of sources. It depends what you want. Now, scratch builders, I tend to find it's getting harder to get bits. Forgive me because I'm behind this, but you haven't come to look at me, you've come to look at the models. So you have white metal castings, which was one of the questions. One of the best ways looking forward, I find, as you're walking around the halls and you see a manufacturer doing the company's coaches you want, I tend to find most manufacturers, chatting to them, will sell you parts out of their kits, including such as the castings. But in the old days, CCW have gone by the way now. They had loads of them. You'll pick up quite a lot, funnily enough, on the Guild second-hand stand, which is where I get a lot of mine. But on the other hand, if you're stuck, come and ask me, because I've got more than I'll ever use in my lifetime, I have to be honest. So if I've got, like the louvers, anything I've got that's of use to anybody else, basically they're welcome to it, if I can help out all I can. But manufacturers, I mean, Slater sells these axle guards and things separate. Dougie, one of our members who's now in New Zealand, and he's probably online, to be honest. He did the evening with in January. He did his axle guards separately, some at my request, for 4 and 6 wheelers. And okay, they were northeastern, but you'll find in the early days, a lot of coaches were built by such as Birmingham Wagon and Carriage Company, private companies. So a lot of these castings are common across all the user companies that bought the product. So just because it's LSWR Fox 8-foot bogie doesn't mean to say you can only use it on the LSWR. They were one of the most common bogies across all pre-grouping coaches. And okay, they might have LSWR on the axle box or NER on some axle boxes, but you can soon rub that off and put something else on if you want, but I just rub it off and don't bother after that. So that's the four-wheeler. It's a birdcage end, so it'll have a raised birdcage. It's louvered and it's only got the guards compartment left at one end, and that's because it was converted into a hounds van to go with the race trains, and this will go with our horsebox train on the layout. Underneath, standard four-wheel chassis. Now, a long wheelbase four-wheel wagon, coach, whatever, on a layout, if your track's not that good, and I'm particularly thinking of larger layouts or garden railways in particular, you're going to probably get derailments because you've got a long wheelbase, and of course you have to keep your track reasonably level for that to run. Now that's pretty well impossible, particularly outdoors. So I do a rocking axle at one end, which we'll see there. Now I've got one of these made up somewhere, so I'll show you that and how we do the various axles. I've put some brake gear on, which are bits actually from Slater's and so on. You can buy all these separate. And ABS are a good source of, they just do bags of brake gear for wagons and things. But this effectively is a long wheelbase wagon. Sprung buffers, there's many sources, but these are actually Gordon Hayward's, and spring couplings and things you can get from many sources as well. So that's quite easy. I'll move on to that axle. Just get rid of that coach out the back. So we've got one fixed axle at one end, not pivoted. It's in the axle boxes, the white metal ones that we've bought there. And the other end is pivoted. Now, the only thing I find is you don't want that pivoted axle, turn it around the right way, to move too much, and that one is moving too much. Now, this one, you'll notice a piece of black plastic card under to limit it. When I put the piece of black plastic card under the other one, it's 40 thou in this case, that's going to limit that to around a millimetre's worth of movement. And that's all you need. I've found if you get too much movement, the wagons, if you place them wobbly axle to wobbly axle, for want of a better word, they can actually, in rough track, fall over, which is not what you want. And similar with the six-wheelers. So we tend to put a fixed axle on one end to a wobbly axle on the next item of stock. And that keeps your whole train more stable when it's running at speed. And if anyone's seen Ravensbeck and Runswick, we're a set of lunatics. We do tend to run at speed. After all, it is a train set, and we're all just big kids. Now, that's your wobbly axle in more detail. So, if I get a Slater's wheel, pull it apart. I'm going to say this is one I did earlier, but if you do it too much, of course, you make it loose. And we slip that through the piece of brass tube that axle just clears. I can fit the axle back on. I won't bother pushing it right on. But then, of course, we've got the part of the axle sticking out that we now don't need because we're taking the weight in the middle. So we can snip them off. With your Dremel is quite good. I'm just reading a message. Oh, it's gone from Jamie. And we've got the wobbly axle. You can see there, I've got another piece of tube at 90 degrees soldered to that axle piece of tube. And through there is a piece of rod. Make that fairly substantial, at least 1 mil. I've actually used brazing rod, silver solder from work, which is quite hard and solid through that piece of tube. And then for your height, you obviously want your axles to fall in the middle of the axle box, just so you're looking from the outside. So I've just bent it round at what I know's about right, soldered it to a piece of square scrap. So that will stick on the underside. Now, if that axle height isn't quite right, make that a little low, if anything, because you can pack that out with card, plastic card, or more brass. So you can actually increase the depth that it needs to stand down. And again, I'll go back to the one I did earlier, shall we say. And you can see there the piece of square brass sticking to the body. We can see the longitudinal bit sticking through, the smaller diameter, and then we can see the piece of brass that's actually carrying the axle. And then the brake gear and things are just cosmetic around the outside. And in this case, those are Slater's plastic bits of brake gear. And I don't use a plastic rodding to cross it, I use brass. I always think after working for the NRM, they run things very, very hard. They have a lot of protracted derailments because there's nobody there with the layout. And so I make things a little stronger than perhaps it needs to be underneath, because I know it's going to get abused. So that's that. I'll move on to the roofs for that, which will cover other things while I'm at it. So if you've all seen the video, borrow your good lady's rolling pin. Make sure you wash it before it goes back. I think actually aluminium rolling it is, the aluminium's toxic actually. So be careful who you feed after you've rolled your aluminium. But anyway, I tend to find in a conservatory we've got some lovely modern deep pile underlay and carpet, and pressing on the aluminium, you can roll it quite easily. Now I say a rolling pin rather than rolling bars, because rolling bars that long or longer, as some of the coaches are quite expensive. And even though you'd get a substantial inch or inch and a half roller, you still get some flexing. So you get a different radii across the aluminium, which is why you can see I've measured in the middle the width of roof I actually need, and then I've put another centimetre each side where my two fingernails are, and I've scored that with a Stanley knife. Just I find 2 or 3 light scores will get you a third of the way through. You don't even need to go half. So when I roll it, if you roll, even when you're rolling boilers for locos, you tend to find they're not a perfect radii right round. You get the radii you want in the middle, and as you get towards the outside, you tend to lose the radii you want. But that's why we've put these overhangs on, because then you can just bend them where you scored it and tear it off. There we are. So that's gone. Okay, that's a short piece of roof. It's an offcut from one of the others did. So remember, before you start rolling, score 2 lines on each side, a centimetre, half an inch, whatever you've got spare really. And there was a question about the aluminium, about where to get it. Just to show you what it's like, go down your local plumbers merchants, Plumb Centre or wherever. You're not buying a plumbing part, you're buying a gas fitter's part. In the old days, and there are a lot around still, people are moving to a house, renovate it, they'll have a tiled fireplace, and they would fit a gas fire of some description. So for give or take a few pence, depending on where you go, you can buy a sheet of aluminium. It's about A1 card size or paper size, and it's 1/2 mil thick. Now from that you'll get about a dozen coaches. Oh yeah, don't want to see me, look at yourselves. It's blue on one side only because it's covered with the protective plastic, but that's all. So about a £5 for a good number of coaches, and of course you can use it for wagons or anything. I use aluminium because when you bend it with the rolling pin, it stays. You don't really want to, low technology coaches, go into trouble of spending all that money on nickel, silver or brass sheet. And if you do in particular buy brass sheet, you've got to start annealing it. So, which again aids rolling, so that when you roll it, it stays to that radii. and you have to roll it a number of times to get it down to the radii you want. Whereas with aluminium, you can do it once. A lot of them, forgive me, I'll just have a quick. That's a snag with being a chatterbox, you go dry. A lot of it, I'll just put the rolling pin on the workbench and bend it carefully over with my hands. If it's not a long coach like a 6-wheeler or 4-wheeler, I won't bother rolling on the carpet. If you've got some offcuts of underlay or carpet and you put them up 2 or 3 deep, it's worth rolling on them than on your workbench. It saves you kneeling down on the floor. So that's the way I recommend. Now that's okay for low arc roofs. You can do high elliptical with it, which this was one of the questions. I have some parts here, part kit, part scratch, and that's a high elliptical. There we are. So that's you can see on the end better, I think. That's a high elliptical northeastern coach. So there's no problem doing that. People have problems with etch primers and things, I'm told, on aluminium. I've never had a problem, but I tend to cheat, I think. Once you've rolled it and broken the edges off, sand it all, and a little bit of sanding round the outside edge on the underside, because that's going to take the glue better when you glue the roof on the coach. But do the roof, sand it all over in all directions, and that's for a number of reasons. But this one being electrically lit, it's just got some vents down the middle. The electric cables are on the inside. Rain gutters, you probably can't see that well, but there is a piece of plastic microstrip each side just for the 2 rain gutters. Now, I'm a bit paranoid, but if you use not so much Met Pack because it's a weaker one, but Plastic Weld or, you know, one of the stronger, the Airfix clear liquid is quite strong as well, I find. You can stick it on with that without any problems. Because you've scratched the surface and roughed it up, the glue's got something to key to, and it will stay on very well. I've never had one come off. Now, being as paranoid as I am, and in particular because we've always done so many exhibitions and the stock's in and out of boxes, particularly at the end of shows when you're rushing, I was always concerned about the corners breaking bits off. So I tend to, once it's dry, put a little drop of super glue on and just smear it on just the corners. And that's me just being doubly safe, really. To stay on the roofs, because it's just general coach then, really. I'll pass you another one out. This one's a Danny Pinnock kit, but we're not really looking at the fact that it's a kit at the moment. You don't really get a roof with it. The old PC models used to recommend you get about 10 layers of quality cartridge paper to roll over, but that's a clear story roof. Rolled aluminium as a low arc. I've drilled and put the grab handles on where the steps are up each end, and of course this one's got gas pipes. Now, quite easy to do. These, there's only a bracket under each gas lamp, and the rest of the time, and there's one at Beamish which I photographed actually from the overbridge, there's no brackets actually on the pipes. There is on some of the others I'll show you in a minute and how to do them. But when you buy, say, some of the KNS brass rod, it's about 1 foot long, which of course isn't the length of a coach. But most of us in our model railway clubs or our life, you have used that cheap telecom 4-core wire, 4, 8, 12 core, but it's single core copper wire. There's a piece. Somebody might recognize the colorings of it. It's been common for years. Put one end in a vise or both ends in a set of pliers, twist it around the pliers and stretch it, and that will straighten it out, of course. Just as solid brass wire. Old tricks are the best. I've not done this right because I've just stretched it in my hand. But then with side cutters of all things, very gently, just pull off the plastic coating and you've got brass wire there. And if you stretched it, you'll feel it just give before it breaks. If it breaks, don't worry. It's cheap. Do another bit. But you get enough to lay on your roof as your gas pipes. So you don't need joints then, because you can have as many yards of that as you want. Now, I'll show you another one. Well, let's finish this one first. Northeastern Clear Stories, and a lot of other companies will like them. The Clear Story, which comes as part of the kit in this case. Look at your Clear Stories on your pictures first, or your drawings. Northeastern and quite a lot of other companies, the Clear Story didn't actually come to the end of the roof. So I can see why these are so expensive to buy sometimes. You make a coach with 4 walls and a roof, and then in effect, you make another coach with 4 walls and a roof to sit on top of it, which is the Clear Story. So obviously that's work that you wouldn't have to do normally on a low arc or a high elliptical. I'll just go on to another one to complete the gas pipe details. I'll just drag the roof off for now. So this is a Great Northern coach, and that's more common with the gas piping. Electric pipes are easier. If there were gas, generally speaking, throughout the country, later converted to electric, they'd quite often put a conduit down the roof. So that's similar to the gas pipe anyway. And I understand, and I'm not sure about this to be honest, but I understand some of the companies that converted, because there are already gas pipes on the roof, they would use that as the conduit to push the electric cables through. Which, to be honest, seems like common sense to me, but I've no real evidence of that. It's just stories I'm told. Now you can see there, I've got some microstrip. You can either use plastic strut or slaters. There's plenty of microstrip on the market. But if I get a pointer, you can see I've cut off a number of, what, 2 to 3 millimeter wide, tiny offcuts. And I pop them on, I pick them up, have them all over the workbench, press them lightly with your scalpel blade to pick them up and pop them on, bob a drop of super glue and pop this on, a quick twist and your scalpel will come away quite all right, and that will stay. Or, again, if you're a bit paranoid like me, I stick them on with a plastic weld or met pack because I've roughed this surface up before anyway, so it will take the plastic weld, stick them on. That's fine, but again, each end I'll just put a blob of super glue just every so often, just to strengthen it up, because we manhandle them so much, to be honest. In the group, we don't really have, well, we have a permanent layout, but we don't like leaving a lot of stock down the club, as many people don't nowadays. The fittings you can get, again, ABS. Danny Pinnock of DNS will sell you all his fittings separate. In fact, quite often see them bagged up on his stand, large torpedo ventilators and so on. Plenty of manufacturers round if you're looking around the show for that. But if you're ever stuck for any, again, email us and I'll give you a list of people that do them, or the guild linked to traders. Looking around the various websites is very good. You'll find what you want. Some people doing lost wax brass, and I've stuck them on, they're great, but I don't think it's necessary to go to the expensive brass ones, because you're going to paint the damn things anyway. So that's one with the 2 gas pipes. Check your railway company again. The Midland had 2 gas pipes. The Great Northern had them, because one would be the pilot for the lights, and the other one would be the feed when they actually switched them all on. And of course, if you've got gas lighting, then on the end of the coach, and there's one here not quite finished, you'd have a rod across with a handle on each side, and that would be the gas shut off. So if there was a fire or a problem either side of the coach, somebody could pull that and shut off the gas to all the lights. So that's one thing you would need, which you wouldn't need obviously on an electric stock. So I think that covers roofs. I've got another 6-wheeler here in front of me actually, and that's got, because it's painted, it just shows things a bit better. You can see on that, it's got the rain gutters on the outside edge and the rain gutter in the middle, which again, you can pick up off photographs. And a lot of the early coaches as well, your torpedo vents only went on smoking compartments, and then just the rest were gaslit. They had ventilations, but that was over the doors. You know, so they didn't all have torpedo vents in every coach. But again, if you've got photographs or drawings through your society of whatever you want to model, that'll give you a good clue. But you get used to the type of companies you're working with all the time. So I think that covers the general coach. Some of the other bits we can go through quicker. This is one for Douglas in New Zealand, who had the Whitby layout, or has it. We had an evening with him in January. He's a member of our group in Keighley, and been out to see him 2 or 3 times, I forget how many. That's the plasticard side again, a Great Northern coach, square beading. So it's just microstrip laid on 20 thou plasticard, drawn out in pencil. Make your mistakes in pencil. It's cheap and easy, and you can soon alter it. And then obviously with some plasticard vents stuck in for ventilators, because these were quite old, peculiar ones, that you can get white metal ones, but they didn't really apply in this case. So this was a teak coach. So on the end, I can show you how I do the teak, which is one of the big questions. That's just brush painted with a large flat brush. I'll pick one off to show you. But it's a sandy colour, any sandy colour. The darker sand you have, the darker your teak will be. But any sandy colour. And then Dougie, if you saw the Whitby video, had 2 Great Northern bathing machines, he called them, that ran from the Great Northern through the northeast and up to Whitby. In 1920, the Great Northern bolted them both together on this chassis, a bogie chassis, and that's the picture that Dougie sent me that eventually it looked like. I move it back, we don't see so much then, but that's the teak effect. Quite nice. I've got East Coast joint stock, which is the standard lateral linear red lining with gold, or gold with red, if you want to talk about it that way around. The Great Northern were blue and gold, and then the Great Northern Northeastern joint stock was green and gold. And I made a rake of those as well that are in the museum in York, actually, when they're not running them round and crashing them. I got a bogie back in quite a number of parts at one time, many years ago, from that rake. So doing the teak, it's the most common question I have. You can spray or paint any colour you want. That's fairly simple. I'll go through that a little bit more later. But the teak, I use, well, Ronseal do wood stain, and you can get it in all colours you want. Pick a colour slightly darker than what you really want, because I tend to find a lot of them are so light, you end up putting 2 or 3 coats on before you'll show any grain. But the wood stains are very, very thin, thinner, sort of thickness of viscosity of turpentine, should I say. So a little more viscous than water. So paint them on with a flat brush again. It goes off in 10 minutes at the most. So as it's going off and it's tacky, you can scumble it, go back with your flat brush and introduce some strokes, add some more varnish, teak finish if you want, more of the wood stain to give the wood effect. And I'll show you the brush. And I think Peter Scarborough in our group's online, and he's a very, very good wagon builder. Sadly, Modern Image, mainly. He was pre-group when we were going out with the layouts, but he's got Modern Image now. But we use a nice flat brush. So it's not round at the end. You can see it's flat. And with the flat side, you can introduce the grain as you want. And it's the same for any painting. I tend to use a large area, use a flat brush. With graining, remember, if you just look at an L&R picture, the Severn Valley, North Yorkshire Moors Railway, wherever you've got any teak coaches, notice that on such as the lower large panels, the teaking or the grain goes horizontally across, and then once you get to the windows, it's vertical. So there is a difference, and then we'll go across again at the top where the ventilators are. So just introduce that with your brush. You can just paint some sand paint, a cream light colour paint on a piece of ordinary plastic card, not card, as long as it's the same material as what you're doing the finished product with. And just have a practice first. It doesn't cost anything. But obviously once you've done a few, and then over the years, don't worry, just like the real thing, the stains will all be slightly different colours as they fade or get dirty. I mean, to be honest, if you look at most of the teak coaches nowadays, where the water's got in, particularly into the corners, they've gone black, where the wood's soaked into the thing. I mean, I've got a Morris Minor Traveller, and of course I've got timber on the outside that's subject to the weather as well. Which is why, showing you them two last coaches, they were square panels, 90-degree corners. And of course, that's what most railway companies did away with, because that's where the water would collect, freeze, break the varnish and get in. So later on, they started doing curved corners. Those are the better ones, withstand the weather much better, the rain flows off easier. So how do we do them if you're scratch building a coach? Okay, you can cut all your windows out and mark out where your beading is on a piece of 20 thou plastic card if you want first. Cut your windows out and start introducing a 5 thou plastic card overlay. But you've got to cut all that out, get it accurate, cut all your corners accurately. If not, particularly when you start lining it, it's going to look a real mess. So let's look at the easy way around that. And many of us got the easy way, particularly from our school days. A paper punch. We all recognise them. Not expensive. Being a Yorkshireman, not expensive. You can punch out a whole row of holes. And then, I'll hold it. Oh, it's working out quite well for being close. You can see I've drawn a square around a hole, which then produces 4 curved corners. So cut them out with your scalpel. Prick them one at a time when they're on the workbench. Lift them up and pop them into the corner of the square beading you've already done yesterday or the night before. Touch of Met Pack and it stays there, and you've got the perfect curved corner, but you've got the same corners right across the entire coach. And I think I did a little drawing. There we are, just in case that didn't show up on the screen that big. That's basically, you can see you've paper punched the hole marked with the red pen, and then I've gone in a square around it with the purple pen, and you can see I've got 4 corners that I've cut out. I mean, I've not had to cut the curve. That's been punched out with the paper punch. I've only had to cut the straights. And I've got a question to everyone. Round corners, what radii? Well, they're the radii of the paper punch, and I've never had a comment. But having said that, looking at the Danny Pinnock and the Highfield coaches, they'll look about the same radii. From O gauge, you know, for the standards we do, I've never had a comment saying that's wrong. I admire people who may want to change a radii, and the other thing I'm told you can do, but I've never bothered, to be honest, is get some leather punches, and you get all different radii in them, but go to a bench grinder and sharpen them all up, because the leather punches are fairly blunt. So sharpen them all up, then you can punch out your 5 thou plastic card with them. And again, you get a various radii corners then. So that's that bit. I'll have another quick drink, and if I can, I'll just show you a couple of coaches quick.
We've got, Robin, we've got another question. We're on the subject of styrene sides. How to make the tumble home curve in styrene coach sides?
Yeah, about to show that. I've done a big drawing.
And
I've got a real one to show you. Well, I'll move on to that now, because I was just going to show you a couple of other coaches quick, but that doesn't matter. We're here to serve the customer. So that Great Northern coach we looked at earlier, I'd left the other end off, so you can see the tumble home there, and how I've done it. So we have a flat straight sheet of card on the inside, and then we've got the 20 thou plastic card on the outside, which from the waist beading tumble homes in. Now, don't overdo it. Most coaches, you only want a tumble home moving in of no more than 2 millimeters. And so you can see along the waist beading, I've stuck the 1mm piece of card, which is what the glazing will sit on. And then I've stuck 1mm pieces of card where I can at the top, where there's actually space to put it. I've done an inner wall, as you can see. And the 20 thou plastic card is not strong enough for a coach side. I found this out the hard way about 40 years ago. They're okay for about 6 months and then they start moving and warping with the heat and temperature changes. But it's the strength of the inner card and the way wherever there's a gap. I'm watching my finger on the screen here and it's like moving it in a mirror, of course. It's the wrong way. I've put a piece of card down the panels. So we've got card, a strip of card right across the waist beading, strips of card in the blank panels down on the windows, and then looking at the end, you can see the outer wall curves in and joins the inner wall at the bottom. Now I've got a drawing to show you that a little bit better because it's not easy to see. So there we have. Now you probably find all the writings the wrong way around thinking about it.
No, it's all fine, Robin. It's readable.
Yeah. So the red, basically, is the 1/8 millimeter timber floor for the coach. I like a nice thick timber floor that I can screw doll's house screws into or small self-tapping screws, because I make a brass or metal chassis separately, and then I can screw it to the coach body with the floor. And then the sides, we can see the purple is the 20 thou outer side or a commercial side you bought, which could be brass. If it's Trevor Charlton, it's nickel silver. If it's Highfield or one you've made, it'd be plastic card. And then the that outer one, you can see I've scored there in the black. I've cut every 1 to 1.5 mil, 2 mil, a line right down the length of the coach to weaken it where I want it to bend. And I'll show you how we do that, because it's similar to the way Jack and me did the scenery, the sugarboard buildings on the layout. You can score down with your scalpel, just going 1/4 of the way, not even half the way. If you go too far, you'll start showing a weak line on the outside of the plastic, which you don't really want. Not too important because you're going to spray it, so, but you know, you do see a slight change in the radii then. So score it lightly, but then turn your blade 90 degrees. So you're looking at the triangular section, and drag that down the same score line to widen it out. Because going back to the drawing, you want a wide groove. So when the plastic bends, it's got somewhere to move into. See what I mean? And then what I do, unless it's Sunday morning when you're doing your Sunday roast, your roasting tray should be free. And they're normally about 1.5 inches deep. Put that on the kitchen surface or wherever you want. Boil your kettle, pour water in it, and you'll get about 1 inch of water. And then you can drop your plastic card in it. And I just tend to hold it in vertically because it doesn't need to be in there too long. I have let go and it's fallen in there. It doesn't matter. It's fine. You've put your beading on. You've done a flat side, as we had on the 4-wheel earlier. You've got a side like that. You've dropped it in. This one isn't tumble home, by the way. It's a very early Stockton and Darlington coach, so they just had straight sides. But I want to bend just that bottom bit in. So I would have scored that inside, as we saw with them little back triangles. Drop it in the water, bring it out. And what I do then, I've got a piece of bar. I use these for the cove roof stock, for that sharp radii each side, and for the tumble home. I'll put that on it. I hope I don't drop this on the keyboard and press a key. And I've got some long assorted. We all have these in our workshop. I'll pick a shorter one out because it's lighter, but I've got some 4 times this length and size. I'll put that on to hold the bend just while the plastic card cools, and of course it hardens then and stays in a tumble home. So in the hot water, let it become malleable, take it out, sit it on the rod and put the weight on and walk away and leave it. Yeah, you could use a scraper to scribe. I know exactly what you mean. It's a blunt scalpel in effect, isn't it, really, to score the lines, because you're creating a fairly wide line that plastic can bend into, which is scraper's fine for that. The other way I have done it, because I've scored it and weakened the inside, and I haven't bothered with this because it's a bit finicky, I think. You've scored all the inside lower edge. We're going to bend it over that way. So then I've soaked all those lines that I've just scored, soak all them with Plasti-Weld, which again just makes the plastic malleable. And I've just held that on a workbench with my thumbs on. There, just bending it like that, just holding it till it goes off. But I'll be honest, that takes a bit longer. You can hold it in the curve, easier with a 4-wheeler or a short coach, a bit more difficult with a long coach. But I found, well, people bend roofs and things in plastic hard using hot water and wrap them around bits of wood with elastic bands and things. But I find just holding it in the hot water is fine. I've heard of people actually switch on the gas ring as well to keep the water boiling, but I don't find that necessary. There is different qualities. Some of the makes are a softer, more malleable plastic hard, and then the evergreen is quite a hard quality stuff. But again, it's like buying nickel silver sheet in your scratch building. Do you buy the hard, which is good for some things, or the soft, or the half hard? There's various types. So I hope that answers tumble home. But if anyone's any problems, because I know that was one of the questions, have a go. No one gets it right first time, in particular me. So it's like modeling. If it was easy, we'd all do it, then give up and do something else. It's a bit of a challenge, but practice makes perfect, I think, is the old saying. So I've done my thing, if I go back to that drawing, with the cove roof. That's showing a low arc, a constant bend. But with the cove roof, I think I've written on there, which will be the wrong way around, between them 2 red lines, if you scork, which is the latest word of the night, I think, or scribe, lines down the full length of your roof, 1 millimetre apart, that makes that part of the aluminium weaker. So when you roll it, that will bend easier. And okay, roll it to a low arc profile to start with, and then move on with, and I use the same bar, because it's the only one I got, because I'm not going to buy any, because I'm a Yorkshireman. I use the same bar and just press it into the aluminium with both hands down onto it. And then you can pull the outer edge or the rain gutter edge of the coach roof up just to create that sharper radii at that point. And cove roofs, and I've got a lot to do. I've got, I think it's 6 or 7 LNWR coach roof coaches to do sometime. Something I've always wanted to do. I'll get round to them, I promise it. So that's that.
Robin, while we're on the subject of roofs, I've got a couple of questions have come up.
Good.
Do you ever canvas the roofs? And if so, what material do you find best and what glue do you find best?
I did.
And the other thing is, on your roof, how do you glue it to the body?
Yes. I was just having a quick look because I didn't know whether I had a canvas roof here. And I was looking across because there was some there. I have canvassed them, and I've done it with it was a synthetic silk because it was finer than the finest cotton I could find. And I stuck it all on with the PVA wood glue, let it dry, and then of course there's bits stick up. It needed sanding then, but even though I sanded it, it wasn't the perfect roof. It looked a little coarse. And of course, on top of that, then you've got to put your usual gutters and fittings and things. What I found was better was a tissue paper. But I find I don't have to do that. If you've got your aluminium roof and you sand it, and you're sanding it with quite a coarse paper because you want to create scratches, because it's those little minute scratches and indentations that would take the liquid glue. So that's actually creating a rough effect anyway. And then I spray paint them in a matte, and they come out with quite a coarse looking texture anyway. Certainly by weathering them, and I weather with, I've tried all sorts over the years, but I now just weather with weathering powders. I varnish afterwards, because if not, you end up with thumbprints all over the roof in the weathering powder, of course. But just the weathering powders makes it look as if it's quite a coarse finish. Sticking them onto the coach, when you do the interior, and you're putting your seats and your table lamps in, and if it's a saloon, you'll have a dining table and so on. When you've put all them in, don't be skimpy on the glue, because once your roof's on and a coach seat comes loose after 12 or 18 months or whatever, you're going to curse. And you can get the roof off, it's not an issue. I glue them on, and the only glue I use, which two types, it's the same type of glue but two makes. I use Dunlop Thruxifix. Now I think somebody bought the Thruxifix and it's no longer called Dunlop. They've probably bought the Dunlop company rather than the glue. I can't just remember. And the other one is Evo Stick, do a time bond. Now you want time bond or you want Thruxifix, and the reason is when you stick something in and pull your glue out, it strings everywhere. Yoo-hoo is some of the worst for that I've found. It's a good glue, don't get me wrong, but it strings everywhere. And I find after you've painted and lined the coach and you get a string of Evo Stick or Yoo-hoo or whatever over the side you've just lined and over your transfers, over your glazing even worse, you're going to curse. So I use those two because they don't string and they've held together perfectly well. We had a garden railway in Rawdon that I think quite a lot in Keighley will have been to, and other members in the area, very large garden railway. And we'd always meet in the morning. The ladies would come up and do a high tea, shall we say. And we'd all go for a pub lunch, ladies included, of course, at lunchtime. And we'd run in the morning, and one summer I'd left the Areca coaches out, and there were metal and plastic, a mixture like I normally have. Came back and just grabbed them to move them down and actually burnt my finger ends. And it was quite bad burns. And the sunlight had played on those coaches for the couple of hours we'd been gone, and they'd got that hot. And the aluminium roofs stuck to the bodies with Dunlop Thruxifix or the time bond, and the rest of the bits stuck to them were in perfect condition because I panicked. I thought, you know, shall I throw a bucket of water of them? And I need to cool them down quick. They're going to explode or something. And they were perfectly fine. No problems at all. So I'm quite shocked. And I have accidentally, I have to say, on the same layout, left stock out overnight on a frosty night. And it rained like hell. And again, the glues and everything have been fine. The only snag with rain was, and we've run in the rain for fun, is all your wheels go red rusty, and then you spend hours with a fiberglass brush cleaning them up. So they'll all take a little bit of wear and tear without any problem.
So going back to the card, the interior for the coach, Robin, you were saying you use card. Is that styrene card or a mount board type card?
I have used styrene, but I tend to find there was a company called Trucks out many years ago, and we got some of their coaches that we used to run on Ravensbeck, and he used real teak veneer stuck onto plastic or styrene sheets. He'd paint and line and varnish them, look super, and you just 4 sides, 2 ends, you stick it all together, do a bit of work on the underframe and roof, and he had a coach and looked great. But I found a combination of wood and styrene tended to warp. They expanded at different rates, obviously. It may be just a case of the fact that he possibly didn't use seasoned teak. It could be as simple as that. But all the coaches, sadly, and they weren't cheap, went like bananas. So they got scrapped. But what I do, and people like Fred Newman, who used to do this for a living, weren't daft. An LMC, of course, Leeds Model Company. Go down to your wholesalers. Hobbycraft is nationwide at the moment, but a good A1 sheet of card. It's always white one side. You can get any colour the other side. People use it as picture mounting card and so on. It's I call it 1 mil thick. I've never actually measured it, to be honest. But I get a light colour that's nice for the interior of the coach. That, to be honest, is fairly irrelevant because you tend to spray your coaches anyway on the outside with primer, then you finish colours, and then you start painting the inside. Mainly, you teak them anyway with the wood stain again, and then usually up behind the seats is white, no matter what company you are, with the pictures on the wall and luggage racks if you wish to go that far, of course. But yeah, I just use card as the interior, as a straight wall, going back to that drawing for the strength. So that interior straight wall, ignoring the tumble home, is card, and then the exterior is brass, plastic card, zinc if it's a Charlton side, whatever make your coach is, but it's always lined with the card. And I find well, as we saw with the Great Northern, card interior, plastic card on the outside, and I've never had any warp. On the other video that I'm sure you'll have all watched, and I tend to find you don't fall asleep for about 20 minutes, but in the first 5 or 10 minutes, it shows you an East Coast joint stock teak coach that's around 40 years old, and that's that construction. Card on the inside, plastic card on the outside. It's run on gardens, in the rain, around the exhibition layouts, of course, and it's never moved. So that's that. And I've got the demonstration one here that's a number of years old, and that's actually Highfield styrene in the grey. The rest is various bits of Scrappy and Kirk, again plastic, and you can see the Ian Kirk brown on the end, plain plastic, then sprayed with a grey primer, yellowed with Humbrol, painted on with a broad flat brush, and then the teak stain put on top, and then a little bit of lining done in that case, just to show the various stages. It's quite a strange coach, is this, because the other side's Midland Railway. Now, the one thing I've never understood is it's a PC bogie coach set of brass sides, and somehow I ended up with one coach side left over the years, and how you get one coach side I will never know. Where the other one is, hopefully before I die I may find it, and then I can make the coach. But I take this to show us as a demonstration. You can see the interior there, what's looking like slightly orangey, that's the same card in white. You can see it going off at 45 degrees there, where I've cut it for demonstration purposes. And that's just painted with the stain, again, to show the wood interior. And then the end, of course, is painted white. The seats will cover 2/3 of that, with the 2 pictures above that you get on most coaches. And there's a message from Jamie that I've just missed, but I'm sure James will read that and come back to me.
Yep. He says PC often had a spare side for the different heights of the stock.
Oh yeah, very good. Just one spare side.
Well, that does seem rather strange, doesn't it? Can you elaborate on that, Jamie? The coach you showed as well, you said you'd lined part of it. Is that something you do yourself?
The demonstration coach?
Yes. Do you do that yourself?
Oh yes, yeah. I've been a Yorkshireman to spend money and have somebody else paint your coach.
Good Lord.
I'm a big believer. There are super professional painters, both inside and outside the guild. But I like to, whatever I make it all myself.
Yeah.
All the layouts that Jack and me have built and toured with the group over the years, we've done everything ourselves, including making track and scratch building engines, usually because you can't get a kit. And of course, I only moved on to coaches because we started knowing nothing. I could only solder 2 wires onto a piece of track because I'm ex-Engage 40 odd years ago. So we had to learn it all the hard way and the expensive way usually. So that was that. I know I have a few spare sides lying around. Well, I would be very interested, Jamie. So if you want to drop us an email, we'll talk about that. I'm just a sucker for, I love going around the guild second-hand stand, and you'll quite often see just 2 sides and 2 ends of a coach in plastic, wood, zinc, whatever, and I'll buy them. And the most interesting thing I find is going through all my books to find out what the devil I've bought. And so you end up with coaches from all over the country. I think the next ones I'm making after I've completed these on tonight's talk is just to be daft. I thought I've got 2 Great Northern Scotland coaches to do, and I'm doing them partly to honour Tommy Day, when I was a fan of that line. So I thought, well, I'll do my Great Western coaches with them. Why not? They all had wheels, so now I've got a collection. There's all sorts. I like the colours. I've done blood and custard. I've done Mark 1s. You can buy enough of that stuff now anyway, ready to run. And it's good products. It's a great move. But I don't think these companies will go too far back into pre-group because it's more of a minority subject. I was just looking around to take these glasses off because these are close-up ones actually. So I'm looking across. Oh, there we are. It's 101. I've got some 12-wheelers, but that's one that was partly built in the last talk. So that's it completed now. And it was some Charlton sides I had given for an early LMS coach. And I thought, oh, Bain, he worked on the North Eastern Railway and the Midland. So if you see a Bain set of panels, you can probably chop and change them for both companies because they're all the same standard size panels for both companies. What do you do for lining? Yeah, easy. You have good days and bad days. We all do. Easier to show on wherever it's gone. Oh yeah, the demo coach. So car spray red primer. I don't bother with self-etching things for a coach. There's enough, I'm going to say tumble home. There's enough beading and vents and bits lying around all over it. You can see this one's been well manhandled at shows over the years. So that's the red primer over the brass. And then I've sprayed it with, well, whatever you can get. It's usually Precision, but very often Humbrol. That's a Midland red, obviously, for the Midland red coach. And then it's lined, Primrose and Black in this case. I've got various coaches here. But I use a bow pen. I've tried all sorts. I've tried the Oldie and Cherry pen. I've tried rotoring pens. And I think Pete Scarborough's on being an ex draftsman as well. Well, architect really. He's used to bow pens and rotoring pens and things. The rotoring pens were fine, but they took so much cleaning out. I got fed up of them. So Kerr, Kerr, German, I find they've been the best make of bow pen. Try and get one with the numbers on the dial. So when you unscrew it to clean it, you can set it back exactly to the number you had. It's not essential that, but it's a help. And you want one with quite a sharp point, one that'll, well, I'll say draw blood, but I won't do that now.
Oh, go on.
But you do need a fairly sharp point. And I have a whole pile here, actually. of rotoring, you know, pens that have got fairly blunt ends. I don't know whether you can see. I'll just put the two together. So they're fairly blunt. Now, don't ever touch or alter the inside edge. That's where your paint flows. You want a nice smooth surface, chromed or whatever, to help the paint flow. So don't touch that. But you do need to narrow the joint down. And I get some fine wet and dry on the work surface or wood block, and just rub the outside edge along it to fine it up. Then turn it over and do the other outside edge. It's personal choice in the end. And as we're all taught at school, I think not nowadays, to use ink pens and do our italic writing, they also taught you that the more you use a pen, the more it will wear to your style or the angle you use it at. And that is perfectly true. So I've had this one many years. I don't want to lose it. I've gained a lot of others from people. I have used them, but only when I can't find mine. A good draftsman shop should sell you one, but through all the makes I've found, the KERR, Kerr, a German make, it's the most expensive. You're not a lot of money anyway, but they're the ones I recommend. Stir your paints, don't just shake them up. You get a lovely sludge in the bottom, as you do with some of the proper Yorkshire beers. Stir it up with normally the other end of a paintbrush I use, anything. But stir the sludge up and then give it a shake after that, whether it's precision or Humber or whatever. Don't thin it. Just dip the pen straight in, wipe each edge off with a piece of kitchen roll I use, and then you're straight on the model. Many times, if it's a good etch, brass etch, nickel, silver, whatever, or even if you've stuck your beading on with plasticard very well, you don't need a ruler. Let me close the pen up because it's not very good when it's open, is it? But I'll just close it up. Might as well pick this one up. Its hand's right in front of me. And if I can see, I'm looking at the screen here when I should be looking at the model. You can just put it in, and I'm just doing the gold edge there. Well, hang on. Hold it up a little bit higher. Can just go do the gold edges. I tend to do all the flats on that way, then turn it round and do all the flats the other way. Let it dry, and then do all the verticals on one side, turn it round and do all the verticals on the other side. And if you do need a ruler, I tend to just use a 6-inch ruler, even for doing the ones over the full length of the coach. Again, you've got the full length one there in the beading, and that isn't done with a ruler, which, you know, with that view you can see how good the etchings are, really. That's not my lining. The bottom line there is me with a ruler, but that one is the etch. So you can see that the etch is better than me. But that's done with a steel ruler on the edge, but just a 6-inch one. Because if you try and go the full length, quite often you run out. If you start struggling, pack it in. Go back, dip your pen in the terps, a bit of terps, open it up, clean it, close it up, looking at the number you had, so you've reset it to what it was, and start again. Because I don't do it at shows because the tables move. I'd like to do it more at shows because it's one of the most frequent questions I get asked, and I usually have the pen with me to show them, but I just don't actually put paint in the pen. But if I can get a solid table somewhere and keep everybody at least 400 yards away, I'll line. But I usually have it with me just to show them. Don't be disillusioned. I have bad days. Depends how late you stayed out the night before. No, I'm only joking. I'm too old to drink now, to be honest. So if you have a bad night, don't worry. Pack it in. Go do something else. Come back, and the next night it could go like a dream without any problems. Don't say, right, tonight I'm going to line a coach. You've got to be in the mood. And of course, you do one colour at a time. With Midland, all the raised beading is black, so that's quite easy to do. If it's a fairly broad line, I just do 3 black lines in a row or 2 black lines, and because it's wet paint, they'll both flow together anyway, and you won't see a join. I have done it with a fine brush, painting the top raised edge first, and then gone round with the gold or the primrose, it's called, isn't it, afterwards. But to be honest, it's quicker and easier, I find, with the bow pen. I've got a wide line, so I'll do 2 or 3 thin lines together, and that's that. But don't give up.
While you've got a bogey coach in your hand, Jamie Guest asked a question earlier on.
Yes.
About balancing, keeping the coach level.
Yes, I was going to go on to bogeys on the ones I've got here, so I'll put that one away because it doesn't come apart too easily.
Ah, right. Okay, great.
So I have some here that'll drop to bits much easier. Where are we? Oh, just grab that one. Most of the chassis are the same, but I've quite a lot of these made up here, and there's 2 ways to do it. I tend to drill and put a bolt through from the coach, as you can see there, and what I'll do on one end, I'll put quite a small washer, so that would then rock. If I hold it that way up, it will then rock side to side that way and side to side that way, which is fine. But as Jamie says, if both ends did that, it's not going to sit upright, it's going to wobble all over the place, probably go around the layout at a 110-degree angle or something. So the other end, I put a washer on again, but 1, 2 or 3 times bigger. So that way it can do some of that, but there'll be none of that, I find. Or there is another way I've done it, and there's no better way. It's just whatever's easiest. I'll put that somewhere out of the way, full of clutter here. And I'll draw this one out if I haven't done already, because I may have drawn it. No, I haven't drawn it. Let's see. These are some bogeys I've got to do. That's what Cavalier do. You can see they've got the washer in the middle, and they've got a pip on each side there to stop the side-to-side wobble. So you can put another washer on there, and you've got 2 pips to limit it. But what I do, and I'll just grab a felt tip pen and draw on this because it's not painted, I can scribble all over it. If you had that center section as a flat piece of brass, as the other bogey was, actually, thinking about it, if I grab it, probably easy to draw on this one because it's isn't painted either. Let's forget that washer's there. It's a flat piece of brass. Okay, it's got 2 square holes, but let's ignore them. On one end of the coach, put 2 pieces, brass rods the best, 1 mil or bigger, 1.5, even 2 mil. Put one across like that, probably wider than that, to be honest, but I've obviously finished because there's a hole there that I can't draw in. Leave a gap for your bolt to come through, obviously. So do that one end. So that bogey, because it's got a cross member, is going to do that, isn't it? Now at the other end, do 90 degrees. This is not drawn on as neatly. So do one down the coach, leaving a gap for the bolt to come through. So that one is going to move side to side. So you've got movement side to side for an even track, in the garden in particular, and you've got movement that way for an even track. But you've got 2 opposites each end. So one will keep it upright, and one will give it side to side for an even track. So that's the other way to do them. You can actually do that with just plastic sheet as well, or round microstrip, but bearing in mind it's plastic, it does wear. It really depends how often you intend running the layout. Obviously, being exhibition layouts, we didn't run that often, but when we ran for 2 or 3 days, or particularly in the old days when you went to the 7-day show in London, you would really be giving things hell for a day after day. So I hope that helps you. A wide washer one end and a much smaller washer the other end keeping the thickness the same because you want the height to stay the same each end. You don't want one end like that and one like that, do you, to exaggerate? So keep them the same, but one a narrow diameter, one a big diameter, or just a cross member on one end and an opposite cross member on the other end. They're both the same thing, really. Any more questions? Shall we move on a bit? I haven't even looked at time.
Can I pick up on that? Because
Yes.
certainly that was one of the questions Richard Allen
Was
about the uneven track outside.
Yeah.
There's also a question from Andy Sparks about how you manage to deal with lean. So if you've got a coach that leans, is there anything that you can do to give a solution for that?
I find out why it leans, to be honest. And I've got, under all these piles of junk, I've got, oh, there we are. I'm working 3,500 volts, 6,000 volts mainly with our equipment, but that's off what we call an SCR relay that the power goes through, and all the holes in it are for water cooling, which on that voltage is a bit alarming, but we don't usually get leaks and big bangs. But that's a perfectly flat square piece of, we've all, if you've got a workshop and you've been in the game in a while, we've all got various blocks of Bakelite and plastic all cut that we scrounged all over the place, cut and square where you can hold bits of metal while you solder them. But with that, let's grab a bogey again. Stick that on your workbench, put your spirit level on it both ways, make sure your workbench is reasonably level is what we're saying. Then you can put your bogey on there, and when I'm making a wagon or anything, I always put it on something flat like that to make sure all your wheels sit on the ground and it's square. And that's just basic, wagon construction. But let's be honest, a bogey is just the same. And that's why we had the compensation unit on the end of the four-wheeler. Being a long wheelbase, it's hard to keep it square on bad track. But with that, you can put the spirit level on both your bogies, because is one made and soldered together on a slant? Okay, I've exaggerated it by showing you there, but it's just to show you the example of what I mean. So in which case, you may want to put a little piece of packing. To be honest, I'd just use a piece of brass strip on one side, so that when you put your spirit level on, it's level before you start, before you go near the coach. Then, of course, do the same with the other one. So before you start, your bogies are square and happy. And then, of course, you need to know if your body's square and happy. So I'd stick your body on then, sit it on both bogies on a nice flat square surface, and just take a look at the body. And if you can rock it, you can think, hang on, I need to stop that, which again goes back to the cross in brass that we did earlier on the bogies. So you can compensate for it that way. The only snag is if you're putting stuff on top of a bogey, you're raising the body height. So just bear that in mind when you're making a coach. Most of mine, particularly the six-wheelers, come out too low, and I've got to pack them up. But you're better off packing up, because you can pack up, whereas if they're too high and you've got to file bits off to take them down, that's a lot harder.
Jeff was asking what size brass you use for that packing piece, but it's going to depend on how much you need to build it up, doesn't it?
But yeah, it's I use scrap brass from Etches. The one great thing I find, and I've got a whole tray of it here, is if you buy kits, locos, coaches, whatever, and they're etched brass, the best bit of the kit is the scrap brass from the outside. If you think about it, it's stripped brass, or nickel silver, of course. Cut it off and save it. Don't throw it out. I think we were talking before 8 o'clock, and somebody had a huge box of scrap bits, which shows you've been a good modeler, because you've made a lot of kits and you've had a lot of bits spare left over. We all end up with things like that. But I've got from, funnily enough, Digham Couplers up in Skipton near me, Skipton Club. They're only 10 miles away. We visit them quite regular, but not at the moment, obviously. And I get a lot of his nickel silver strip, which he normally weighs in. And I get it from the outside of the etches he has done when he sells Digham Couplers. And it's pieces over a foot long, I would say. But it's lovely nickel silver. The only snag is none of it is parallel. It's all straight one side and an angle the other side. So it'll be 1 centimetre wide one end and 1.5 centimetres the other end. But that doesn't matter. I'll show you why. This is a Midland coach. This is with the help of John Hobden, the M&GN expert. And I says, well, hang on, where did that coach come from? Made by the Midland. And it didn't go to the M&GN till 1937, I think. So I'll be doing it as a Midland coach, because obviously that's my period. But in the middle of there, you're going to hang all your garbage off on an underframe. I say garbage, this is electric lit, so you can see a brass and white metal battery box in the middle. Midland vacuum brakes, the 2 vacuum cylinders, and then footboards on the outside. And then the middle, I have in the past filled with just a big square of tin plate, because I got a source of brand new shiny square bits of tin plate. So I put them in because you just want a load of metal there to hang your bits off. But this is actually bits of waste dingham, but it's the outside edges of etches that you'd normally throw away. And it's used actually just to hang all the garbage off. The East Coast joint stock and West Coast joint's a bit harder because of course it's dual braked. So you'd have Westinghouse and vacuum under there. That's, while I've got it in my hand, that's obviously a Midland coach then. Later M&GN, this one's electric lit, so it's a bit easier. Not as many pipes on the roof. But you can see the difference in the ends. I was saying earlier with the northeastern ones, the clear stories had a step in, whereas the Midland and some of the other companies as well, the clear story was part of the end. So that your clear story roof would go right to the end of the coach. So that shows you, I've got the overhang a bit much there. But you can see the difference slightly. And okay, I've got etched sides, but that's all I got. Found out what they were, and there's no clear story, so I've had to make that in plastic styrene. And that has got some bits of scrap etch vents on, spare from an old kit on the side. And the window's cut out, of course. That's 20 thou plastic guard again. And that's stuck on with a bit of microstrip on the inside just to give it a little bit more strength. But it's stuck on with the plastic weld, just liquid glue. Of aluminium, I've sanded up the aluminium roof, so it takes that plastic glue. And that's solid. There's no problem there at all. I haven't super glued that yet in any way, and I don't think I'll bother, to be honest. That's rid of that one. I was going to move on to 6-wheelers, but has anybody any urgent questions, like who's buying the next round or whatever?
I've got a couple just to lead on from when you were talking about bodies and making sure about the movement. You said about checking that your actual coach is square. There's a couple of people have asked how you actually make sure that the ends and the walls of the coach actually do go on square when you're building the body.
Good old-fashioned technology. And the other thing is, particularly when you're soldering, I like soldering because we all made plastic aircraft kits as kids. You stick them together, you got it wrong, and that's it, it's tough luck. You solder 2 bits of brass together, get it wrong, you can unsolder it and do it again. I keep telling everybody this in O-Gauge. This is why you do O-Gauge. You can make all the mistakes you want and then curse yourself and do it all again. So yeah, T-square is very good. We've enough suppliers at the shows. I mean, everyone says Squires, but there's many others as well. Arlene's Emporium's one that sells a small square like this. I've got one twice the size. That this looks big against my face. I should hold it. That's probably more realistically in scale, their actual size. The other thing is, for plastic ore modelling, I've got, well, from work, from our big SCR relays, perfectly milled square pieces of, I call it Bakelite, but it's not actually Bakelite, it's a red equivalent. And I've also got, smaller squares of the aluminium, but again, perfectly square. So when I'm doing, I think I've got one here. This is a Danny Pinnock kit, but I've left it very basic to sort of show people what you get in the box. Now, I have started soldering some of this together, but regarding this, it's perhaps ideal. So I've soldered one side there to one end, and yeah, I've just super glued the ventilators over the doors. If you do super glue metal, just again, like with the aluminium roofs, rough it up. But all I do with etched brass and white metal is a rough file. I won't say the word bastard file because it's naughty. I use a rough file on the back of the white metal because it's easy to just scratch it and give something for the glue to adhere to, and a fiberglass brush on the brass just to take the finish off, and then they'll stick together. I've never had one come off, and I don't put a lot of super glue on, and I use the best quality super glue. For a £1 you can get a whole tray of little tubes of the damn stuff, and I find it's fine. I do have Posh Loctite as well, which is okay, but I can't say one's better than the other, to be honest. But that, once I've bent the tumble home, which with that little steel tube, piece of rod I had, is how I bent that tumble home. And then last of all, I soldered the end on. So I've got two sides and ends the same that eventually I will put together. But on the workbench, on a nice flat, I've got a piece of old kitchen surface actually, because that, I call it Formica. We used to have that years ago, didn't we? But the inch thick stuff is usually quite level in a small piece, a foot or 8 inches square for your workbench. And these squares sat in the corner while you solder it. Don't sit it on the tumble home, obviously, that's bent up, but sit it on where the windows are. You can pop that in the corner, and as long as you solder it in the right place, if that's not quite a 90-degree angle, you can just bend it a bit, and the worst you're going to do is break it, so you just resolder it, no problem. Bear in mind, and this is more for engines I find, when I'm talking about them at shows, the lower the melting point on your solder, the weaker it is. Now, on large surface areas, it's not going to bother you. But bear in mind, if you're doing a small surface area, and I've been invited around 1 or 2 clubs on club nights, nothing to do with shows, and I went to Pendle, I think it was, Burnley or Pendle Club, and there isn't no gauge modeler amongst them, but we did a soldering demo with RSUs and all that sort of thing, like Rob does, the other hall electrician. And I actually demonstrated soldering with low melt and then pulled it off. And then I tinned the brass with high temperature 188 or 145 solder just to tin it, and then melted it back together again with a low temperature solder to white metal, and you couldn't pull it off. So it's just silly hints and tips like that that we don't really need for coach building, to be honest. But I'll talk about anything all night. So yeah, that's being soldered up with a square, like you say. A lot of the coach manufacturers are pretty good for keeping the chassis square. This is a Danny Pinnock, is a lot of experience. I'll hold it that way, you can see it a bit better. And you bend the 2 sole bars up to 90 degrees. You can check that with your T-square. You can put lead weights on each end on your flat surface to know it's nice and square. And then, like PC models and quite a few manufacturers, for the detail on the sole bar, the half etch for rivet heads and bits like that, they do a very thin etch, and you can hammer out your rivets and so on, and you solder that over as an overlay just for aesthetics. But you're bending up, you've got quite a substantial floor, and you're bending up the same thickness for each sole bar, then doing an overlay for aesthetics. And actually I'm doing that with that 4-wheel one in plastic. Forgive me for bending this just while I find my sole bar. There's one. Forgive the scribble on it. But if you use quality cartridge paper, some people don't really know what that is, or a quality thin card, I think that's a bit of an old Christmas card, to be honest, without the printing. But thin quality card. With a punch, not a sharp punch, a blunt punch, punch out where your rivet heads are. And of course, you're not using the side that you're punching. You're not using the side you're punching, you're using the other side. And you'll have a slightly proud piece of a rivet stuck out. And then to ensure they stay stuck out, just smear each one, you can see the darker stripes, with super glue. And that'll set and hold that tiny rivet in place. Very hard to see on the screen, I think. It's showing up as bright orange, that's all, where the super glue soaked in the card. Oh, you can see there. I don't know whether you can see. It's either spots on my face or spots on the sole bar. And then that, I'd made that 4-wheel coach earlier. It's only a 4-wheeler, so I made the sole bars out of plastic card. That will just glue over it and give you the detail on the sole bars then. And then, as with the other side, I'll stick some footboards on the sole bars. You can see the white there against the dark blue and the white against the dark blue there. I painted the dark blue just with a felt tip pen, just to ensure that the rivet heads would show up enough before I'd gone any further with it, really. But by the time it's sprayed, obviously, I'd like to think you won't see that bit. You'll just see the rivets. Dump that back there out of the way. So yeah, getting your body's fine. Just don't rush anything. And if you're getting tired, just go to bed. I think most of us model on a night. But yeah, if it's brass or metal, don't worry if you make a mistake. That's fine. You can unsolder it and start again. I've actually cut the card for that, the 1mm card I was showing earlier. This has got a grey backing like the other side, of course. And I cut that ready, the size of the coach side. And then if I go back to my old demo bit, oh, there we are, under a pile of paper. Going back to the teak side, you can see the other side where I've actually just held, I've lost that card I just had now, not that we need it. I've cut a piece of card the whole size of the side of the coach. And then I've dropped it in. And where I've dropped it in, I've just, hold it so you can see it really. You can see I've scribbled around there with a pencil and coloured it in. It's faded over the years a bit. And then I'll lift that card out and then just cut round those pencil marks, but to the outside slightly larger. So when you drop it back in, the card is flush with the exterior plastic or brass, depending on what it's made of. And that way I've got some here half cut. You can just press out the card then, and you've got them all in line with the windows. Drop it back in, and you can see, actually you can see on that side, now to turn it around. You can see there the white. I'm looking down so I can see I'm pointing in the right place. You can see where I've just put spaces of card. So the glazing, when I drop it in, will sit on top of that plastic. And it can't go any further that way because the divider has got a piece of card down again. So there'll be a separate window here. And then there's card down again behind that teak panel there. But they'll all sit on this, along the waist rail, a strip of card. And of course below there, I've got no card because that's where the tumble home's curving in. So your gap's getting less and less until you get to the point where the inside sheet of card and the outside of the coach touch, and they're glued together, and they're then glued together against the timber of the floor. If I can talk this long, I'm going to get to what my dad wanted me to do, be a preacher. It's a 1 day a week job. So he said.
Robin, I'm conscious we're at 9:30 and I know some people probably want to carry on if we can, but there's a few questions about glazing and windows which
Yes,
we've
there
sent in
is.
advance. So perhaps we can cover those off first.
Yeah, going back to that, what have I just done with that thing I've just had? Yeah, how to stick glazing in if you don't have a double skin. You don't have to have a double skin. Actually, just in front of me, there's the interior of the Danny Pinnock coach. This is for his corridor inside, back corridor. Not that it matters. So if that's just the thickness of your coach, whether it's in brass, plastic, whatever, you're going to stick glazing over the inside. I have used Yoo-Hoo because it dries clear and adheres to the plastic quite well, because a lot of the glazing plastic I find is like an acrylic sheet. It doesn't melt with it marks with glue, but it doesn't actually melt very well. But Yoo-Hoo does stick it. Just be careful with the stringing. But going back to the impact adhesives, the Dunlop Thruxifix or the Time Bond, they're fine. And of course, because they don't string, it's not as hard to glue in, because you're not stringing and going to get glue at a 45 degree across the front of your window. Hold that up. I'll put glue round the outside, but the narrow bits in the middle, if you put glue right to the edge, then you put your glazing on and squash it, it can splodge out into the viewing area of the window and make a mess. So narrow areas like that, I don't bother gluing. I glue around the larger areas, and of course I don't go right up to the edge. I finish it, you know, around there, a millimetre or two in. Bit difficult to scale off a screen, really, isn't it? But you can see what I mean. I'll just glue around the outside and then stick the glazing on, and that's it.
What material do you prefer for glazing, Robin?
Well, I get it from a local plastic manufacturer who's doing very well at the moment, one of our group members actually, and he cuts it for me, although normally he does bulletproof screens and bomb-proof screens for railway stations and things. So I use 20 thou because that sits nicely with the thickness of the card. And you just use you can get an A4 sheet of a clear acrylic, and it was plastic crut I used. I found that a slightly better and much clearer quality than this latest plasticard one. Shouldn't really promote one company over another, but if you held the two side by side and had a look, you'd make your own mind up which is the best. They can be quite hard and brittle to cut, so I carefully score them 2 or 3 times. You're not really going to cut right through very well. But then break it, and I tend to break it over the edge of a straight edge. I've got a thick steel rule. There's 24-inch actually, so that's ideal for coaches, seeing as they're all over a foot anyway, and just break it over that so you get a nice straight break. And once you've got a strip, normally about 25mm wide, it'll cover most windows, most sizes, with a bit of above and below. So you've only got to cut the lengths off then for whether it's one compartment or all compartments together, whatever you want. I get asked a lot about toilet windows and frosted windows. In the later days, when tissue paper vanished, and I did use tissue paper a lot, you can get a clear plastic that draftsmen use who aren't using CAD cams. And I got a lot, I'm going to say I thought that was some up there from the MOD, but it's basically like tissue paper, but it's a plastic film. And I tend to cut a piece of that out, as big as the gap I've got, and drop it down behind the window, but in front of the glazing. And then you can just quickly draw around it with a pencil, and that creates an electro-etched gap right round windows, as most did. Then you could put a cross in the middle, or draw a little with your pencil, draw a coat of arms or something. But it's on the outside of the glazing. So then pull it out and put it the other side of the glazing, the inside, and it fits, no problem. But of course it's easier to, I won't pull that big ruler out because there's things sat under it that'll probably end up on the floor. But it's easy to draw across there and do a line in the middle, go the other way, and you've suddenly got a cross in the middle, and you know it's in the middle of the glass. And it's easy to go around the edge with a pencil to create the line, which works out about 0.5 millimetre in, as a lot of this old electroplating was, like we see on pub doors and things. And you can do a crest. If you've not got a very bright actual low gauge crest, I have put a real crest on the inside, and by the time it shows through the plastic film, it loses a lot of its colour, so it looks like an electro etch anyway. And people are only looking at this coach as it whizzes past on the layout. I've never been one for really entering too many competitions or anything. We have done, but by accident, you know, when you've got a layout, it's quite often in things whether you like it or not. So but I never really make showcase models because I don't think I'm that good, to be honest. That's that. So we're getting on a bit. I'll quickly move on to the last bit. 6-wheelers that I get a lot of questions asked on. Okay, this is, quickly clip it back together. 6-wheel coach. That's a Furness Railway one. Fixed axle one end, just like on the 4-wheelers. Axle boxes, the white metal castings. So that'll keep the coach upright, straight and level on the track. At that end, it's not going to move anywhere. The other end, I use a bogie on 6-wheel coaches. Again, we've got Garden Railways, quite rough track. There's a little nut on this that I just left on so it wouldn't drop all over the floor. There's a bogie. All it is a piece of metal, tubes on the outside of the axle each end. So then I've cut off where the bearings would be normally. These are Mansell wheels. You've got a bit of flat brass you can hang bits off in the middle. This is a Westinghouse air cylinder in this case. There's a hole in there for your pivot. So it's a bogie, and that sits on a bolt. Get it so you can see. You can just see the shiny bolt there. So then what I do is, you're bending that up, you can calculate and measure how high the end needs to be to get the middle of the axle to the middle of the axle box. Don't worry if it's wrong. Make it too short, then you can pack it. And the beauty of packing it is, on that bolt, you fit a little washer. And then that goes on. And then on the bolt, a spring, and obviously a nut at the end, which is what I don't start with. And that bogie will wobble, get it so I can see it. It'll wobble side to side because it's got that washer to do that with, and it will wobble up and down as you would get on rough track. And that will go around the corner very well. Danny Pinnock does it a different way. I've got one of his ready-made, but to prove it works, that, believe it or not, is a 40-foot long coach. The North Eastern made some 6-wheelers 40 feet long. It's only a saloon. Now the LNWR made 40-footers with radial axle boxes that they later changed for bogie coaches. But that's the same arrangement. And there's not much movement, but you don't need a lot. And that goes around 5'6". It doesn't have to on our layouts, but obviously we take stock here, there and everywhere. 6-wheelers, DNS or Danny Pinnock and PC do a slightly different way. You can see the middle wheel hanging down. It just floats about. I don't like the way they use the Slater's wheels, because Slater's wheels are great, but there's no weight in them because they've got a tiny 1/8 axle. What I use is the Roxy Mouldings or Laurie Lovelace, the old home of O-Gauge that's long gone, the standard 3/16 axle wheels with the Mansell centres, usually in white metal if you can get them, because you're putting weight on the wheel, as you can see when I tip it like that. It's hanging down. And all he's got is a wobbly axle one end, side to side, if I can show that, there. A fixed axle the other end, which again is what you need to just hold your coach square on the track. Then the middle one just floats around, up and down and round and anywhere. It's just on a brass rod, a thin brass rod right through the coach, and you can see it there actually. That's soldered at one end, straight through the middle, and soldered at the other end. So it can drop down, move side to side, twist, turn, whatever. But to make it work and stay on the track, you need weight there. And that's why I use the 3/16 axle wheels. And it's the same with the earlier four-wheeler, with the wobbly wheel, as I call it. You need weight for that. So it's all right on a four-wheeler with Slaters, or if it's six-wheelers, if the mansell, it's not a problem. You've plenty of weight in your wheel. But if not, you end up soldering lumps of lead there, if you've got a 1/8 axle, just to give it some weight so it will just sit on the track, because that's all you're asking it to do. But if it's slightly rough track and there's no weight there, it bobs up, it's going to derail. That's not what we want. We're here to play trains, not put things on track.
Robin, while you're mentioning Slater's wheel sets, there was a question from Michael Holland about the fact that in the video, you removed a wheel from a Slater's wheel set, sleeved the axle and set a wire pivot on the sleeve.
I showed that to
Hard
start.
to see.
Good question. And I'd written a whole list of what you said to start with. So we covered that first thing. And actually, I'd not put the wheel fully back on, because that's about a 40mm gauge at the moment. I just popped it on the end. But that was it. Pull it out. And that's the wobbly bit. Put that back through the tube. It's nice to oil that if you're running, by the way. Then you can push the axle back on. It's nice to push them on nice and square. Then of course chop each axle end off, as I've just said with a six-wheeler, with the 3/16, the thicker axles. I was only using the thicker axles for weight, and it is better with the weight for running. Again, we've just learned everything the hard way, not the recommended way. So that's well, it's a very wobbly axle. You can see it wobbling around underneath actually. And if that's too low and it's stuck too far up in the axle box, under that flat piece of brass at the bottom, just pack it up. And pack it up with as much brass as you need, or sheets of plastic, or whatever you want. The only thing, going back to what I said originally, is with all of them, you don't want too much wobble, because you can get to a point where if I do that, you can see obviously that's going to derail. Now they're not going to get that far, obviously. I'm exaggerating it, but I tend to find 1 to 2mm wobble at the most, and all I do for that is to put little bits of plastic card under there to just give it a millimetre clearance or whatever. So that plastic card thickness, I tend to find 40 thou seems to work, to be honest. And on that four-wheeler we showed earlier, I know we're going back off old stuff, but it doesn't matter to me. Mum might let me stay up a bit later tonight then. You can see there, as we said earlier, the bits of black plastic card just in there to stop too much wobble. But that side that I'm holding now doesn't have the packing in yet. I've left it out. So if I try and push it that way, it's not going down much at all, as you can see. But that way is too much, really, because I haven't put the packing under yet. I'd left it out just for the demonstration. Next.
There was a question earlier about what size scalpel blades do you use?
Oh, I think it's 10A from memory. You can get fancy curved ones and all sorts. And unless I'm making a horror film, I don't really find a use for them. And I'm sure these are 10A, and I'm trying to, it is 10A, yeah. And I think 10A you'll find is the common size that such as Eileen and Squires sell on the stand, easiest to get. They normally come in packs of, it's between 5 and 10, a foil pack. I'm just looking down because I should have one. So there are I actually, I'll be honest, at least 10 or 15 years ago, bought a whole box of them. Yes, that's right. That's the pack I was looking for. Blue and silver.
I found it. I've got it. It's here.
Yeah, right. He's got it. Right, passes it back. Yeah, but I bought a whole box, and it's the best thing I ever did.
Yeah.
Never had to buy more since, because you only tend to wear out the last 3 or 4 mil at the most. The rest of it's as sharp as anything, as my fingers will tell you. Yeah, the curved blades I've never found a use for, and I wouldn't mind. I can get them free from work, but I've just never found a use for them.
Ian Major was asking the score marks along the side of the roof, which you use to fracture the roof to size.
This is for the cove roof, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you do them before or after curving?
Before. Mark out the flat. Mark out your centimetre each side where you're just scoring that you're going to break off and throw away. And then you can work out where the coving is going to be, and you can just mark. It's a bit of a pain, but you're scoring lines the full length of the coach, but you're scoring them every millimetre for about 8 or 10 millimetres just on each side. I'm looking for a bit of aluminium to show it on, but it's under a pile of coach bodies and chassis and all sorts of detritus. If you pour some molten solder onto my workbench at the moment, I could probably make better money selling it to the Tate Gallery if I stuck some old dirty knickers on it or something as a piece of modern art. Anyway, we won't go further into that.
The aluminium sheet, you mentioned you get it from Plummet or Plum Station.
Yes.
Do you ask for anything specifically? What do you ask for? Is it just aluminium sheet or?
Please, sir, can I have a sheet of the aluminium that you put over your gas fire back? And then what they normally do is they would cut a 6-inch hole out for the flow of the gas fire to go through. And the tape right round the outside to your tiles on your fireplace with that 2-inch duct tape, which we tend to use a lot of at our shows to stick the cables to the floor with. But yeah, I don't think it's got a particular name, but if you've got a lad who's not fresh out of school, and ours is quite good, to be honest, ours, it's just a sheet of aluminium that you cover up your fireplace with when you're fitting a gas fire. And I've never been queried as to a special name or anything. And as Screwfit does, Aliplate used to cover the fireplace when you install a gas fire. Yeah, it is.
And somebody else has said Screwfix does a 600 by 450 sheet for £4.95 for gas fire backs.
That's probably what this is. Looking at the size across the room here. The other one that can be cheaper until I left work, until I retired, but if you've got a printing works near you, or you've got a friendly printer, printers use a slightly thinner aluminium sheet, and the print on it, whatever they're going to print, this is a newspaper set of advertisements, and I don't quite know how the electronic process works, but they print millions of newspapers or magazines or whatever then. But it's the same aluminium sheet. This is an offcut, as you can tell. And those sheets are about 3 foot by 4 foot normally, because they're a double newspaper sheet size. And they throw them all in the scrap bin afterwards, a big skip. I then go weigh it in because it's money. But if you've got a printing works near you, I found the maintenance guys, I think unofficially, were selling me it at £1 a sheet. And for the bigger roofs, being thinner, it was easier to roll. For supporting it, because that was one of the questions, thinking about it, if I go back to, trying to find one of, oh, there we are, got one done here. I don't support it, but having said that, you've got dividers down your coach, which I've done in card for the compartments. And if it's a corridor, you'd still have, you know, halfway across the coach, a divider. and obviously that's just the same section as the end. And then I put them in, but before I put the roof on, I think this is very important, I can't just reach my 24-inch ruler in. Oh yes I can. It's one of the bits that's not covered in junk. Right, here's a big one. Put that along your coach. This is important, as I say, and it should just touch both ends, and it can just touch the others, but if one's proud in the middle, it's going to rock. Okay, I'm exaggerating there, but you can see what I mean. But the last thing you want is to put the glue on your coach roof, stick it on and found it's not sticking down right round because you've got one of the dividers too high. So just put a ruler right across it and make sure that they're all cut down enough, or basically not standing proud, before you take it to the stage where you glue it together. And I just use, again, it was one of the questions that I think I've answered, the Thruxafix or the Evo Stick Time Bond. And just dab it all around the edges. That's important because they can bow up in the middle, which I've never had happen with mine, but stick it all around the edges, on the ends. I then usually do an odd one on the dividers, not too important. And I have done coaches, particularly saloons. I've got various saloons hanging about. Because it's bent and we're only going up to sort of 15-inch, I find actually you don't need supports in the middle. It's strong enough. I've got, well, this is a bit different because it's a clear story roof, but that's aluminium. It's cove roof section, thinking about it. So just them very ends, the last, what, 8 or 9 mil, that was scored the full length every millimetre just to weaken it, and I bent that with that 1/2-inch diameter steel rod. And then there is a radii in the middle. It looks almost flat, but it is a gentle low arc radii in the middle, and then at the other end a very sharp edge again, and that's the other end. Now I'm only showing you that really because down the middle of there you've got support in the compartments obviously, but from there to there being the break, as I remember, and I'm looking through because I can see right down through all the windows. Do you know, I've got one divider there and that's it. So you don't need a lot of support with the aluminium, I find. It's being flat, it would be fairly weak, I think, but because you've rolled it into a section, it's a lot stronger. And while I've grabbed it, that last one was a kit, sides and ends, rest is scratch built, but this is completely scratch built. That's just plastic card again with microstrip on, and that's it's typical. Danny Pinnett and Laurie Lovelace were in Runswick Bay at some show or other. It was a guild event actually, some years ago, obviously. And Danny was looking at my matchboard coaches running around. He says, "Oh, they're nice. If I did some kits of them, Robin, would you buy them?" And I looked at him and I said, "Well, why would I buy them? I've just built them all." Anyway, I've recommended he bring them out as kits, but he's never done. And I just finished that and I showed that to Danny because it goes with my other 1/2 ones. He says, "Oh, that's nice. I'll do it as a kit." And sure enough, you can buy it as a kit now. Not that I've bought it. That's all plastic card. So, well, brass chassis, of course, but the rest of it's all plastic card.
Well, Robin, we've overrun our hour and a half, but that's because what you've been saying has been very, very interesting, I find.
I'm surprised. How many did fall asleep then?
Well, I don't know, but I've been watching everybody. I can't see anyone.
Come on, Tony, do a cooking impression.
Does anybody have any burning questions to ask Robin before we close up? If you'd like to, then you can unmute and ask one straight away.
Thank you, Peter. I've got your message.
That's great. Okay. Oh, just one from Charles. Do you add additional lead weight to your coaches?
No, I've never found it necessary because I use usually wooden or plastic seating, but this is from Tower Models, but it was the old Ian Kirk plastic seating. Ian was in Leeds doing mainly 4mm wagons, but he did plastic seating as well. I buy that. It's slightly more expensive, but you put that in, or the Slater's equivalent actually, and it adds enough weight, plenty of weight. If they are too light, and I've done bogey full brakes where, because there's nothing inside, I've had to put a little bit of roofing lead in, much to the upset of our local vicar.
Not supposed to admit that. Did you say you had some slides to show, Jackie?
Yeah, I've just got a couple, just to make sure people are aware of what's happening next time. So I just go to share screen. So we've been joined this evening by Jamie. I'll just, I can't move the thing. Thank you. Right, that should bring that up larger for everybody. Jamie's with us this evening, but just so that people are aware, on the 26th of April, Jamie Guest is going to be talking about his layout, Lancaster Green Air, from concept to fruition, and its move to France. So if Jamie wants to add to that, I'll come to you in a moment. There is still time if anybody missed out on the virtual show. It ends on the 31st of March, so you can still go to the front page of the website and visit the virtual show, which we held on Saturday the 6th of March. Everything is there, everything was recorded, so don't miss out on that if you haven't had a chance to finish looking around. You've got until next Wednesday. I think everybody knows that Doncaster has unfortunately been cancelled, but we are still keeping our fingers crossed that we might be able to go ahead with Guildex. So we'll keep everybody informed about that. And I'm conscious that we still have non-members joining us for the evening with, which is fabulous. You know, 11 months of £2 is £22. So for 28, you can be a member, get the magazines and all the other benefits of membership. So certainly that's something to think about. And that just brings us to say thank you very much to everybody for joining, and please send us feedback. It's only the third one we've done, so obviously if you do have anything, any hints, tips for improvements, then we'd love to hear from you. Jamie, was there anything you wanted to say about next month? If you want to unmute for a moment.
Just to say thank you very much to Robin for a very informative evening. I've learned an awful lot. But yes, I'm looking forward to the 26th of April. It'll be describing why and how I built Lancaster Green Air and the various trials and tribulations of moving a large layout to France, fortunately before Brexit. And also I'll probably be talking about how I designed and made the overhead line equipment as well for it. So look forward to seeing you on the 26th of April.
I don't know if you've seen that, Robin, but you've got a roll of honour going on here saying thank you and how wonderful it is. So that's really nice.
Friends I know as well. And thanks to Jamie, because I don't know whether he knows, one of our members, Pete Scarborough, is stuck over here at the moment, but he actually has a house near Pampol. So, and he does do the French shows and visits the French groups. So you might want to get in touch with him, Jamie. I mean, if you email me, I'll forward it on to him, because obviously we've got this RGGSP or super secret thing, whatever. Yeah. So as a rep, we don't give addresses and things out, but yeah, Peter's been over there a number of years, on and off, and Model Zo Gauge over there as well.
Okay, then, Robin.
Way out there, and the Keithley one's over here.
Thanks for that, Robin. You'll obviously be able to get my email address from the guild. Yeah. If you send me an email, and I'll mention some. I'll look for those PC coach sides as well.
I know Pete Scarborough was on. I don't know if he still is, but Pete Scarborough's around there somewhere, so he might be looking at you now. if it's not drunk too much red wine. So.
And we've had a result as well, because Andy Sparks has already sorted out why his coach was leaning. So there you go, success as well.
Oh well, at least we've had one winner. That's all that matters. All right. Well, I hope to see some of you around at a show. It's not over now. I'd hope to be around shows for quite a while, whether it be Guild or other events, and just come and have a chat and bring me all your problems, preferably just railway problems, actually.
Right, thank you very much, Robin. It's been brilliant. Very interesting evening.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And good night to everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night all. Well done, Robin. Nice one.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.